My name's Felicity, and I'm married to Chris, the love of my life and the one guy who would do anything for me. Well, that is until Brie comes into our life. You see, Brie is our new neighbor, and it seems that she's willing to do anything to stand between me and my man. Well, it absolutely gets to a boiling point when I'm walking through the neighborhood one day and one of the elderly neighbors runs up to me and says, "Oh my gosh, OP, you won't believe what I saw your husband doing with Brie." Well, let me tell ya. I caught my husband cheating on me with his ex-girlfriend. That day I came early from the office and saw a message from Bree on his phone while he was taking a shower. I wanted to give him a surprise, but instead I got stunned by finding out that they were chatting, and God knows what else they were doing together. It broke my heart, and I simply did not confront Chris directly, but rather I wanted to catch them red-handed. So I called my mother-in-law for the aid I needed the most. "Hello, my name's Felicity, and I'm a working woman. I met Chris when I was an intern in an advertising company, and he was working professional in a design department. Our department depended on each other, so we had to work together in order to correctly execute the vision of the creative director. As an intern, I was exploring my learning curve, though very few were interested in helping me with it. And it was understood, as there was no time to even take a washroom break for anybody due to deadlines. But Chris was like a totally different corporate human species. While we all were working under stress at the time, he was rather calm and just enjoying his work without a single wrinkle of stress on his forehead. And he was also very helpful, like he could detect who needed help in that way. Chris was talkative, and I always talked in monosyllables, not because I was being rude or something, but because I was quite shy in front of him especially. One day after a meeting, which was a congratulatory one as we did manage to finish our work before the deadline, and it was a banger. Though I was quite exhausted after sleepless nights and could barely concentrate on the surroundings, I guess Chris noticed, and that's why he asked me to have a coffee. But in a local restaurant after the shift ended. I wanted to go, but I had another project in hand as an intern, and I needed to prepare everything beforehand to catch up with the team. Chris sensed my hesitation and told me that it was not a date, but an official meeting to help some stuff out from work. So basically, he taught me many of his secret methods to have an edge in the office and also tossed important insights of the coworkers in. I actually had to do the rest of the work, obviously, as his designing skills were no help to me, so it was like having an ally and a wise mentor. This official, quote, date phenomenon continued for the rest of my internship, and after 3 months I finally cracked the code and achieved a designated position in my department. I was thanking all the seniors for mentoring me, though Chris knew I was talking about him as he mouthed, "Thank you," when I glanced at him. It made me chuckle a bit, and later that day, when the shift was over, I asked Chris to meet me for a coffee in the same place at the same time. Chris scoffed that he's not thinking of pivoting to work with the production team, and I laughed and said that it won't be an official date, just a date. He acted all surprised and mocked that he has a policy that straight up condemns office romance. Then I just casually teased that either of us have to lose the job then. I was being playful, though I could not predict it would happen anytime soon, and a casual joke would turn out to be harsh reality in the coming future. After a year of dating and then living as a happily married couple for a year, it happened. Chris lost his job in the recession, and I became the sole breadwinner of the house. Chris failed to cope with the fact that he got fired from the company, which had become his second home. I guess the new managing team did not realize that, and Chris became homesick and started to spend all his time at home. He quit his usual routine and starts to sleep till noon and sleep in the morning. He also stopped taking care of himself, like not taking a shower for weeks. eating all the junk food one can imagine, and even, never leaving the sofa and playing video games constantly. Within a few months, he transformed himself from specter of Suits to a grizzly bear from the movie called Hangover. At first, I tried to avoid confronting Chris as I did not want to sound preachy or someone who's not understanding, but as the time went on, I could not help myself but to intervene. Chris had an interview and he was not speaking anything about it for a week straight, so I just casually asked about how it went while we were having dinner. That was the first big fight we've ever had in our relationship. He acted quite defensively and blamed me that I'm bored of him since he's not as smart and successful as Chris anymore, with whom I had married. I tried to explain my side, but he was not listening, and I was feeling like a punching bag for all of Chris's piled up frustration. It was stressful, and I could not bear this anymore. In the heat of the situation, I opened up the floodgates of my problems, which were not there when Chris was a functional person. I told him that he has become such a lazy couch potato, and one who cannot even keep his body clean, let alone the house. It was me who was doing all the chores and doing anything to keep the house running. Meanwhile, working my butt off in the office and jumbling between the position of a housewife and a working woman. Well, it got to his ego a bit, and he said that I'm not respecting him because he is not earning money anymore. But that's not what I meant, but it doesn't matter when the arguments are conveyed through shouting, then it rather becomes a straight-out bullfight. Chris walked out from the dinner table and so did I. We did not talk for a few days until one day I opened the main door of my house after coming tired from the office, only to find a man kneeling down with a bouquet in his hand with a big sorry sign on it and on his face. I hugged him and ate all the chocolate he bought for me. Well, I needed this love and chocolate also after struggling through such excruciating times. Later, Chris took me out to dinner in a grand restaurant where we had always, reserved a table. Chris promised to be a better person from now on and that we will start freelancing till he gets a job in the market. I was happy to see Chris back in his old ways. That hooked me on our first date. So, after the fight, I was doubting my decision to marry Chris, and I thought maybe he was not the person he showed me in the beginning, and he is also the same old misogynist person in the deep who doesn't give a darn about their partners. Just like my father, who was a pathological liar and cheated on my mother multiple times, and always got away with it as my mother was quite a foolish lover. Or maybe she just did not want to accept the fact that the one person she loved the most holds no regards for her emotions. I hated my father. So much for that, and just never talked to him after my mother's demise. I chose to stay away from those memories and took a job in a faraway state just to start a new life. The past was spiraling in my head after that fight, and it was making me feel sick. But thank goodness my Chris is nothing like that, and he's the most loving, caring partner I could ever imagine. Though, it all changed within a few days when she arrived in our neighborhood. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Chris and I were having a crunchy conversation with a pack of Doritos. Then suddenly someone rang the bell. I opened the door and saw a beautiful young woman standing right there in front of me, and she introduced herself as Brie, and told me that she just moved into the neighborhood. She gave me a present from her gift bag, and as a good guest, I asked her to come in for a cup of coffee. She delightfully accepted it, and we both walked to the living room. Chris asked who it was on the door, and before I could introduce her, he perplexed and said, "Oh, Bree, what a pleasant surprise." Well, I was confused, and before I could simply raise more questions, Bree abruptly answered that she and Chris were in the same school and also went to the same college. I spent the rest of the time listening to the stories of their mutual past and had to endure all the nuances of the people from those tales whom I've never met before, or probably have met at the wedding just for a few moments. I had heard many of the stories from Chris, though, not in such minuscule detail, however. I asked Bree why she'd not come to Chris's wedding, and before she could say a word, Chris answered on her behalf and said that she was on a trip in Europe, as she works in a multinational firm. So, Chris was connected with her all the time, but he never mentioned her name even once. It was kinda that the word is, sus, and quite surprising to have it from Chris, who has never hidden anything from me, or maybe I was just in a false impression. Finally, she went off with her alarm rang, as the sunset was not enough for her to remember that she has been in my house since nearly noon, sitting on my couch and talking all the time with my husband while I was observing the way they both are so comfortable with each other, while pouring coffee after coffee in their mugs. It was not for that alarm that there was a possibility that she might have ended up having dinner with us too. Or maybe she had different plans, as the city is quite huge to settle anywhere, but she chose the neighborhood here. The next morning, I woke up to see that Chris was not in the bed. This was quite unusual, as it was true that he was in the transitioning period to get back on track, but he managed to wake up as early as 10 a.m. on my office time. It was a huge progress considering the fact of his previous schedule of being a night owl and day hound who sleeps until late noon. I was worried and checked the house, as it was only 7 a.m., and he was not in the washroom, nor in the living room playing video games, so I called him, but he was not even picking up the phone, so sent him a text message. I was devastated and asked my neighbors about Chris. One of the members of our all-lady groups from the neighborhood told me that she saw Chris and new girl Brie. They were going somewhere in the same car at about 6 o'clock in the morning while wearing athletic attire. The ladies were asking suspiciously about what's going on between Chris and Bree. Well, I acted all cool and said that I forgot Chris had told me that he'll be going to the gym from the day, and Bree is just a former schoolmate, so I tried to brush off the situation, but I could sense that nobody was buying the lie, as it was hard for me to digest this as well. Later, Chris came back home while I was making breakfast for the two of us, and he said that it was quite exhausting. I asked what he did, which made him so worked up. He replied that he had told me he was going to the gym that day with Bree, so I kept my calm and asked him when he told me exactly that, because I was not aware of the fact. Then he told me that he forgot to tell me, as he communicated with Bree about this when she was on the move yesterday. He avoided me and said that he had planned to join the gym next week, and he had told me this last week, but he didn't tell me that Bree was going with him. I could not confront him directly, as I was only beating the bushes without having solid evidence, though I cautiously slid a question about why he never told me about Bree. Chris just came to me and hugged me from behind. He said that she was a distant friend, and they just, never met after college. Though she was in a common friend group in her social media, and I shushed his kiss and asked that the way they were talking was not a sign of a distant friendship. He walked away to take a towel and said that they did not talk after our wedding, and she was the friend whom he introduced as Brie in his school's day stories. So the person I was thinking of as a guy friend of Chris was in fact Brie this entire time. I was not expecting that to be the case, and many speculations were running in my head, and I could not even focus on my work. Though I did trust Chris, it was still hard for me to forget the way that they were conversing with each other. They were resonating a different sort of vibe, which was above that of just a friend thing. And the fact that Bree also moved to the same neighborhood was also brewing my skepticism. One day, I came back early from the office and looked for Chris, but he wasn't at his working desk. But his mobile phone was there. He was in the bathroom and went ahead to ask me if I would like to join him. But I was rather hungry for food than having shower shenanigans. The moment I was about to leave the room, I heard a notification ring from his phone. It was from Brie, and she was asking him about their plan. The phone was password protected. Chris suddenly came from behind and scoffed that we were yet to hit a jackpot, so I should have controlled my anger before quitting the job. I told him that today was a day break because of a mental health day, and he mocked that every day should be an off day considering the way corporate offices work. Before he could continue with his poor joke and ask me what I was doing with his phone in my hand, I questioned him about what Bree and him were planning to do and turned the phone screen towards him. He just looked at it and smiled and told me that they were planning to surprise their old friend, who happened to visit the nearest city for a tech conference. So, basically, Bree and Chris were both going to be together in a different city to surprise their mutual friend, and I could not be there as I was stuck with my responsibility of preparing presentations for the upcoming meeting. I thought that the world must have been conspiring against me. Am I the a-hole for not trusting my husband, Chris? What should I do, guys? Please help. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. So the comment section on this original post is not happy about all the red flags that Chris is displaying. I mean, come on. How much more obvious is it that something has to be going on with Chris and Bree, right? Well, we do have multiple updates to hop into, and you might just be surprised how this one ends. If you guys are new to the channel, take a second. Hit that subscribe button, guys. It helps support the channel a lot. And let's jump into update number 1. Thank you for replying and giving me your suggestion. The most common one that also resonated with me was about taking outside help. I could ask about Bree to Chris's friend, as they would be taking their side or probably unaware of what is cooking here. So, I chose to call my mother-in-law to ask about Chris and Bree's relationship. My mother-in-law has been helpful to me whenever I was distressed. She was the one who gave me the courage and sincerity to keep up with Chris when he was in the couch potato phase. My mother-in-law insisted that I keep my guard high and confront Chris about his laziness. What my mother-in-law told me was an utter shock. She told me that Brie and Chris were in a relationship from high school to their college years, and they had also planned to marry, but they parted away, and Chris moved to another city to find a job and start afresh. My mother-in-law was equally shocked when I told her, while Brie is now living in our neighborhood, and Chris is so fond of her, though he never told me that she was his girlfriend. After telling all the details of past encounters and the change of behavior, Chris alerted my mother-in-law as she found it very unusual. My mother-in-law decided to pay a visit to my house to make things right. A day later, Chris and Bree arrived. At the moment Chris entered the house, he was surprised to see his mother there. Well, I was on the move to the office, and my mother-in-law simply assured me that she will handle this situation. While I was about to accelerate to my office, a few ladies from our neighborhood came up to me. You see, they said that they understood me, and they would not let my marriage be broken at any cost, since I'm also a hesitant part of their lady group. And they all had a mutual hate for this Brie. I found solace in their words, as maybe they did understand what I was going through. As being elders, they all had more experience of the world than me, and particularly this type of situation. So, in the evening, I got a call from my mother-in-law, and she told me to be stress-free, as they are simply just regular friends now. Well, nothing more than that. She also advised me to keep my trust in Chris, as she said that we mutually know he's not that sort of guy. I didn't want to argue with mother-in-law, and I cut the call, concluding that maybe her motherly instincts won, and that this is why she was taking Chris's side. So, when I reached home, Chris was sitting there nonchalantly, devoid of his usual cheerful energy. I asked when his mom went off, just to initiate a talk. He remained solemn for a moment and said that I should have confronted him by myself, rather than pushing his mother-in-law into the matter. I was shocked that he was blaming me. I raised my voice and stated that he should have told me earlier about Bree and his past relationship. He said he told me, but I didn't listen properly, but I don't remember when he told me about this at all. All I could recall is that he had always changed the topic whenever I asked about Bree. Chris acted as if he was the victim there and said that I never trusted him because I could not stop comparing him with my womanizer father. And I could not hold myself, and I just bursted into anger by saying that he did prove me right. That night, it was our second big fight we ever had in our relationship. Update number 2. The next day, I approached the ladies' group, and they decided to confront Brie. We went to her house in the evening, and I asked Brie about what Chris and her relationship was like in college years, and also why she moved to the neighborhood. She replied with a calm manner that they were in a relationship, but it did not work out as they both had different points of view towards life. As she wanted to achieve a higher position in corporate, while Chris just wanted to have normal, stress-free life. Before she could speak any further, one of the ladies kinda shouted at her about why she chose this neighborhood. Bree replied that her office gave her this apartment as it was one of the most well-cultured residential areas in the city. I wanted to ask another question, but before I could, the ladies started to maul her with their prejudices. One of them actually threatened to leave the neighborhood as she was polluting the culture here, which I supported. Bree replied with her attitude that this is a free country and she could live wherever she wants. This enraged the ladies, and one of them said that she should move to another neighborhood where people like her live. That was quite a derogatory remark. I wanted to intervene as it was derailing from my concern, but the ladies pushed me back and continued their verbal attacks. They shouted at her and humiliated her to the point that it was unbearable for me as well. Chris heard the commotion and came out of the house to the rescue, and he saw that Bree was crying, and before coming to me, he directly went to wipe the tears of his ex-girlfriend. That behavior of Chris just made me snap. He could not sense that his own wife was in anguish and needed comfort, but he had all the empathy for his high school sweetheart. I stood with the ladies and supported the notion that Bree should leave the neighborhood. Chris looked at me with fierce eyes and signaled Bree to get inside her house, and he just walked away to our house without even looking at me. It was so infuriating, and I and the ladies started to knock on the door of Bree's house, but a few minutes later the police arrived, and they warned us to stay back. And then Bree came out of the house with a video which she recorded from her CCTV footage. She also blamed us for racial slurs. After that day, I got a restraining order that was summoned on Bree's complaint, but I could not get the same against her to stay away from my husband. I told Chris that it was his mistake that he did not tell me about their true relationship, and he was trying to hide things from me. He knew it was not me who used racial slurs, but he blamed me for distrusting him. So, he was going to hide things from me and spend quality time with his ex-girlfriend at the gym and go out to meet their friends together. And still, it was my fault. Wow. And Chris also asked me to apologize to her. My foot. I was not going to, and instead I insisted that she should be doing this as she was interfering with my marriage life. That was the day again we fought, and it was the third biggest fight. It's been going downhill since then. Update number 3. It's been about 2 weeks since that day passed, though the rift between Chris and I remained constant and growing day by day. Now, we were fighting for even smaller things like where the heck the TV remote is or why the heck the dishes aren't yet washed. He started to sleep on the couch and also quit the gym and his other healthy habits and hopped back into that lazy Chris who sleeps in the morning and wakes up at noon and spends his savings on junk food and video games. I also confronted him yesterday when I saw him playing video games and not sleeping at all. I was trying to curb my anger, but it did burst out when I was ready to go to the office. He had not yet slept, and nor did he eat the breakfast that was still on the table since the morning time. I said that maybe it was all a hoax. The promise he made that day after our first big fight that he will change and go back to normal Chris. Maybe he only changed after Bree moved to our neighborhood. He didn't really respond and kept on playing his video game, while just talking hysterically with his online teammates about some game strategy. So I grabbed the baseball bat and I hit the monitor as hard as I could. Chris stood up in disgust and threw his gaming headset on the couch. He said that I'm a pathetic person who cannot trust anybody, especially him, and that he cannot continue living with a person who could not trust him, so I suggested that maybe he should go move out to, well, a different house with his side chick. I said that he was just trying to find a way to get back with Brie. Wow. And that is why he was acting all rude to me. I don't know why, though, and also insulting me by reminding me about my father. Chris just said that maybe my father was not what I think he was, and maybe it was me who has a tendency for skepticism. It was quite disappointing, and I could not utter a single word. I ended up crying, and Chris just walked away to the bedroom without even looking at me. How could he be so cold and mean? He told me that I am the only one he has ever loved the most, and yet he could not comfort me like he did to his ex-girlfriend. He showed me my true value in his heart. He was not like this, but that witch changed everything. Update number 4. It's been a month since the last update, and I wanted to, but I was busy with court proceedings and other business. I don't think I did anything wrong. The decision of marrying Chris and trusting him was the only thing that opened the floodgates for all the bad omens in my life. I was observing Bree as she did not leave her apartment and kept flaunting her way to the office. I could not bear this anymore, and I started drinking heavily to ease my pain. I don't remember much, but I guess I went to her office and it was all chaotic. I slapped her very hard. It's the only thing I could recall, and what quit a banger it was. Later I got to my senses and found myself in a police station. Bree did not put charges against me, though, as she had already revoked the restraining order as Chris had pleaded to her, which was not all surprising as she was trying to appease my beguiled husband since the first meeting. Chris showed me the video of my drunk performance in Bree's office and how I slapped her so hard. Yeah, I did feel ashamed as I'm a professional woman, and I have standards, you know. But I could not have gathered the indecency to slap Brie in sobriety, so I was guilty, though I found pleasure in it. Chris again asked me to apologize to Brie in person, but I was fed up with his bootlicking of Brie. So I suggested he should go on my behalf and do that by himself, just like he has done before, when he pleaded to her to revoke my restraining order without letting me know. I was ready to apologize to her company for creating a nuisance, which I did, by the way, as it was indeed something I should not have done. But I could not apologize to that lady who shattered my married life. Chris left me since then, and he's actually filed for a divorce. Later, I lost my job after the video footage surfaced of my drunken self became viral on social media. Chris and I are about to become a divorced couple. He's moved back to his old city, and guess who went with him? Yeah, she did. She also shifted from the neighborhood to hell knows where, probably where Chris is. I lost my job, my husband, and now I don't know what I should do with my life. I guess moving to some distant town would be a good idea, where nobody knows me. Or maybe a different country would be fruitful. Let's see where the road takes me. Alright guys, let's talk about this one. It seemed the comment section from the final updates, they were feeling really bad for OP. Yeah, she probably shouldn't have gotten drunk and did what she did because, well, videos exist nowadays, and so do viral contents, and, well, she got both of those, a video of her drunken rage, and it went viral, which basically cost her her job, made her have to move to another city, had to get divorced from Chris. I mean, you name it, OP went through it. But there was quite a lot of commenters who were saying, you know what, I don't exactly agree that OP deserved this. I mean, she's not the one who cheated. She's not the one who was deceitful. It was Chris. And the mother-in-law, who was supposed to be on OP's side for this. She knew about it the whole time, and she just let it happen. So guys, let me know your thoughts about this, and here's the question of the day. If you were in OP's position and you find out through the grapevine that this Brie character is not just some innocent bystander from college, oh no, her and your significant other have a deep past. What do you do? I mean, how do you handle this? Let me know your route that you would take. Drop it in the comment section down below. Let's discuss this one, guys. Thank you so much for joining me on today's video. My name's Mr. Redito. I narrate stories every single day. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want more daily videos, it's super easy. Hit that subscribe button. 2 things happen when you subscribe to the channel. You never miss an upload, and it helps support me at the same time. So thank you guys for subscribing. I'll catch you tomorrow, and do remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya!